From All Points TV, and today we have Linda Pohly in the studio, and then we're discussing something I think is kind of crucial. I think we should be thinking of all of it's crucial to the people in the Flint and the Genesee County area. August 7th is we vote, and one of the things we should be voting on is a proposal for the well, how do they word this now?
They're calling it the Arts, Education, and Cultural Millage.
Now that sounds kind of high, high sounding and kind of well intended. So let's go into this a little bit. You opposed this millage.
I didn't at first. I intend to vote no, and I think this is the first time I've actually said that. But it's not so much a matter of opposition to the result. I am opposed to the process, and I'm opposed to the way that this is being presented to the public. So in that sense, yes, I am in opposition.
So let's go into how it's presented to the to the general public and the perceptions that are misperceptions in your opinion. So let's see, like what I wrote down basic, it's $8 million per year for 10 years, right?
Well, it's $8,700,000 per year for 10 years. The downtown development authorities are entitled by law to capture, it's the term they use, a certain percentage. So there's about $175,000 a year coming off the top to the downtown development authorities. There is a $500,000 per year allocation to the Greater Flint Arts Council, which is to distribute these funds, the $500,000, by grant to organizations throughout the county. They will take a fee. It is unclear how much of that fee will be. The rest is going to the Flint Cultural Center, but two organizations that are not technically a part of the Flint Cultural Center. That would be the new McCree Theatre and the Friends of Burston Fieldhouse, are entitled to some portion of those funds that is not specified in the millage proposal or in the resolutions authorizing that proposal but to be placed on the ballot.
Well, basically, there is no real accountability for who or what's getting the funding, and that's a big question. I mean, I find kind of appalling because they keep on telling us this is for this, and then when you actually examine the fine print, it's very little that's going to go for what they are stating is the intended purpose.
There's a lot of money. This is a lot of money. This is a really big millage. The county operating millage, which is over 5 mills and pays for everything, the courts and the sheriff and the jail and the health department and all of the institutions of county government that we rely on every day, is first. The second is the Genesee Health Plan, which provides healthcare services for the uninsured in Genesee County. That is funded with 1 mil of property taxes. And right after that, at 0.96 mils, will be this arts, education, and cultural millage, if it passes. The millage is greater than the millage which supports the Genesee County parks. And we have a lot of parks, and they're nice parks. Now, they have revenues in addition to taxpayer dollars. They have concessions. They have admission fees to Crossroads Village and the like. So my guess is that their budget is, in fact, higher than the proceeds of this millage. But the tax money to support this millage exceeds that for the Genesee County parks, all of them. In addition, we have other millages, the MSU Extension, the paramedics, the MTA. They're up for renewal too on a specialized service to offer rides. The animal control. All of these millages are smaller than the millage that they're now proposing. So it's a lot of money and it's a big decision. And if the voters approve this millage, what they are deciding as a policy matter is that support for the arts, primarily the Cultural Center here in Genesee County, will be one of the very highest priorities of our community. That's a policy decision. I have my own views on that, but I'm just one voter. my views really are not important on that. What is important is the public understand that that's what they're being asked to decide.
See, I think you brought put it in perspective when what they're asking for is actually outstrips that which they already are stated that's being used for other, I would say, more higher priority items. So I see Linda's a attorney, so she's really good at dissecting stuff and looking at the fine print, which most people who vote don't tend to seem to engage in. Now it's like of course, the first accusation is going to come out that you oppose the arts or you're against culture, which is I can assert that's not; those are totally baseless. But I think basically that comes down, the opposition comes down to accountability, also the prioritization. Am I correct in that assumption? Or?
Well, yeah. This is America. I can say what I want. I'm not at all afraid of being personally attacked. I don't think I will be personally attacked. I don't think I have been personally attacked. I have been questioned. To my knowledge, nobody has questioned my motives. Nobody has questioned my honor or integrity or any of that. I'm not the least bit afraid about speaking out on this. I think it is, first of all, as we discussed earlier, a matter of priorities. Is this the best use of the funds that we have available here in this community to improve the lives of the people of this community? And I think people could argue that yes, it is, and that's fine. This is America. If you like it, vote for it. But understand that that's what you're voting for. Some of the other issues on accountability get very thorny indeed. Being a lawyer doesn't just mean being able to read the fine print. It's required, professionally required, to be able to absorb large amounts of information, sometimes very quickly, in fluid situations that are changing rapidly day by day, and apply the rules to situations as they emerge and adapt your view, your approach to changing circumstances. It's not a talent, though some people are born better at it than others. It's a skill we're taught. And then we get out of law school and we practice. That's why they call it the practice of law. And if you say you're done and you know how to do this, you're not paying attention and you really ought to retire. In this particular situation, with this particular millage, there really has not been very much disclosed about who the people are that are asking for it. I've learned more than I knew when this started, but I still don't know really who the people are behind it, because they're not publicly identifying themselves, I don't think. We don't know for sure what they're going to do with the money. We don't know for sure who's going to make sure that they do what they say they do. And these are hard concepts, and it is happening very quickly, and the complexion of this thing changes almost daily as news comes out. And for the average person, the voter just trying to decide whether this should be a yes or a no, I think it would be very, very difficult. I'm finding it difficult. I struggle with this every day, trying to figure out what they really are asking and what they really intend to do with the money.
See, I think it's a kind of a lot to ask for the people in Genesee County, because Flint has suffered the water crisis. Largely, it was urban Flint that actually suffered that. But also, there's people on the periphery, and I don't think there's anything that can impact upon a city the size of Flint and the people interconnection between people's in the suburbs and in the city. Because let's face it, a lot of us who live in the city have family members who live in some of the suburbs. So I mean, I just think basically that after that kind of water crisis and stuff like that, I think people are becoming more critical of what the actions are, because the water crisis is a result of a series of bad decision making going on over a course of years. It culminated in what we call the water crisis, but it was avoidable, largely avoidable. And I think now it's kind of healthy. I mean, to be more cautious, to be more analytical, and I'd say sometimes to be more suspicious of people who hold positions of authority and their actions and what they're asking you to believe. So maybe it's one of one good thing about the water crisis, it's woke people up to, they have to examine things deeper. And I like the fact that you brought out too that it's the changing, that this is like the changes daily. Could you imagine after it's voted? Now after it's done, people are going to say they walk away from it, and nothing's actually the intended purpose for this millage is goals largely unmet, or then they're going to come down the road and say we still have inadequate funding. So I mean, it's infuriating, but I basically think it's kind of weird to basically ask people of this area to actually go look at this when this water crisis in Flint, to my knowledge, it still hasn't been totally resolved. I mean, I live here in the city, so I mean, I think the prioritization is, I mean, I definitely like the arts. I mean, I support the Flint Institute of Arts. I have an annual membership to it. I support as much as I can, but it's my voluntary decision to make it. A lot of times people say, well, people voted on something, but let's face it, did they really vote and got what they thought they were voting for? That question is, has got to be asked.
What they're asking us to vote for is support of the Cultural Center. There are some other organizations involved, yes, but that is the point. They want taxpayer support for the Cultural Center, and there's no hidden agenda on that. It's right in front. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a policy decision. I don't think anything that's going on here rises to the level of the concealment and the bad faith that we saw in the water crisis. I don't think anybody is particularly trying to hide anything or much. There's a lot of things that are going on I wish were being made more public. I think that these are, for the most part, maybe entirely well-intentioned people trying to do something they regard as important without really having thought through what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And that's unfortunate. I think that the Cultural Center could be making a much better case for themselves. You don't really need to make a case for the arts because we all like the arts. Nobody is living their life without exposure to the arts. People watch TV, people watch video on Facebook, people listen to the radio. Every day, all of us have our lives improved by this human activity that we call the arts. You're washing dishes and you look up and you see a picture you liked that you saw at a flea market, for heaven's sakes, for 50 cents. And that makes you happy. It makes you feel good. And there's nothing wrong with spending public money to promote the arts. I believe in that. But that's not how they're promoting this millage. They're promoting this millage as something free. Vote for this and you can get in free. Well, you certainly can get into the Flint Institute of Arts free. You can't get into Sloan free. They're not promising to let you into Longway free, though they're saying they're discounting. Who knows how much, who knows which shows. All of these things are to be determined by some people sometime in the future. For reasons that baffle me, they are not selling this concept of public support for the arts as something that would be good for the community. They're saying this is good for you, you get something free. I don't understand how it came to that. These are highly intelligent people. I know the people on a lot of these boards. I admire some of them. There are people who have been involved in public service on these boards for decades. Where have they been as this case has been made? Where have they been as these deals have been made? I don't understand it. The case for the arts, for public support of the arts, is it makes us better people. It shouldn't be transactional. And by making it transactional, it almost seems like they're putting themselves on sale. But they're not, of course, because it won't be free. People are going to be paying, again, a lot of money a very large portion of the county budget will be going to the cultural center. It's a policy decision again. If you're for that, vote for it. What's your next question?
Okay, I was going to say, another thing is too, it begs the question too, people are going to be wondering as they hear this, how currently, how is the cultural, those organizations and those places in the cultural center now are currently funded, and largely it is from like government grants, there's private donors, there's kind of a mix of where the funding's coming from and always has come from. I mean, I don't know the proportions. I don't know what part it comes from federal, the state, what portion comes from private donations and private contributions and, private memberships, like, memberships to the different organizations. Would you happen to know any of those figures?
You can find some of that information out on Forms 990. They are information returns that all charitable organizations must file with the Internal Revenue Service every year, and there's information on those returns as to who's on the board of directors, how the board of directors govern the organization, how much money is coming in from various sources. The 990s for the various organizations do not tell you where the money is coming from. The IRS knows they have to attach a schedule of donors saying who is giving them what, but that is not a matter of public record. You can't get that on the internet. Anybody that wants to see where the Flint Institute of Arts in general is getting its money, and in general how it's spending its money, can go to several websites. The one I go to is GuideStar. It's free. You type in Flint Institute of Arts, and you can see their Forms 990 for the last 3 years. They, as I said, do not publicize where their donations are coming from. For that, you have to go to the 990s for the donor organizations, and it's certainly no secret that millions of dollars every year are donated by the C.S. Mott Foundation in support of the Cultural Center organizations. You can find that information if you look at the C.S. Mott Foundation 990, which is something that I would recommend that any concerned citizen do. They have got a lot of money going all over the world, all over the country, for all sorts of purposes and causes. They are deeply involved internationally in promoting groups that support good government, democratic government, world peace. One of their major funding priorities, though, is the city of Flint. And you can look at that 990 and see just how much money is going from the Mott Foundation to various organizations around Flint, with the Cultural Center organizations being major grant recipients. I don't think there's any federal money going into the Cultural Center organizations. One of the Millage beneficiaries, Greater Flint Arts Council, they call it re-granting, and I don't understand exactly how it works, but there is money coming from the state of Michigan, and it is being managed by the Greater Flint Arts Council. You don't just write a check to people. You have to ask them what they're going to be doing with the money and why they need the money, and what it is going to do to benefit the public, and they handle that part of it for the state of Michigan money, and I've never heard anything critical at all about the way they're handling it. There is a fair amount of money that comes into these organizations through other private donations. There's some wealthy families in our community, and many of them are very generous, and many of them give very generously to the Cultural Center organizations. My sense is, though I could be wrong, that more of that money flows to the Flint Institute of Music and to the Flint Institute of Arts than goes to the Cultural Center, which is Sloan Longway and Whiting. They, of course, have revenues from ticket sales and admissions. It can be hard to sort that out. I can't tell from looking at the 990 what portion of the revenues from the Cultural Center Corporation, Sloan Longway and Whiting, what is coming from admissions to the Whiting shows, what is coming from actual ticket sales at the door of Sloan so people can get in and see the cars or whatever else they have, what's coming from Longway Planetarium, how much is coming from student field trips, how much is coming from walk-in. All of that information is not publicly available. I've never asked for it directly. I don't know if they'd give it to me or not. I just looked at the 990s.
I think that's when I'm listening to you, I'm also looking at also one of the point I want to bring out too is this is like kind of a civic-minded people are examining this, and I would like to say that something on that is like in the Flint area. I'm surprised, even though this area's got so many problems. I'm surprised because I've had this studio for several years. I've brought people in from all, walks of life and different perspectives. I would like to say that I've always seen that it's really interesting that we have so many people who are willing to delve into it, go on beyond their day-to-day routine and their problems in their own life to actually, bring stuff to light, about the community. And you're bringing up so many points that I think that a lot of people, there's other people, the bulk of the people though, are, they just hear this chatter and basically they vote pretty much like an impulse when they go to the polls. They think about it for a second and they just check it off, or yeah, we'll go yes or no or whatever, and they move on. And I'm glad there's so many people like yourself in this town, in this area, that are willing to examine things with more depth, because you brought up several points that I hadn't thought of. I mean, I have opposition. I had concerns that I would like to have addressed. I think that's primarily what you're saying as well. Anyway, what would you offer up for the people who are just listening to this and they're saying, what would you suggest that they do? Would you say maybe go and look it up, go online and do what you were talking about, or?
If I vote against this millage, as I plan to do at this point, it will be the first time I have voted against a millage in my life, and I'm old. I'm a liberal Democrat for many years. I have not paid any attention to millages at all. If somebody's asking for tax money, I say, sure, fine, why not? I got involved in this by accident, but that doesn't really go to your question. What should people be doing? I think the first thing that people should do is attend the town halls. I think that they are being held for public education as a result of public pressure. We should go. We should ask questions. I think that people should go to the Genesee County Board of Commissioners if they have an interest and tell them how they think this money should be managed before the millage passes, if it does. So there is no expectation on the part of the millage beneficiaries that there are going to be checks written that they can spend however they want. I think that the millage beneficiaries really do have an obligation to work with members of the public to make sure that these are in fact respected as public funds. One of the big problems we have in our communities now is that there aren't really local newspapers. We have the Flint Journal. They are not covering this issue at all. East Village Magazine has tried to cover this issue, but they have other priorities. They're not here just to track politics. A lot of stuff floating around on Facebook. I don't use Twitter myself. I understand there is active information being exchanged there. But what I've learned from all of this, and what is going to be my new MO as I go forward, is find out what's going to be on that ballot and spend 15-20 minutes figuring out what they're doing. Why are they asking for this money? What are they going to do with this money? Is this something that we ought to be doing with scarce public funds? Is this really what is going to be best for the most people, not just for me? It shouldn't be a matter of I like to go to the Art Institute and therefore I'm going to vote for this. It should be, when you're considering these issues, what is best for us as a community. We are more than just individuals. Every individual, of course, is entitled to find his or her own happiness and pursue his or her own best interest, but we're not doing this alone, and anybody who says we are really isn't paying attention. That's what government is for us to do things together. Is this really what we want to do together? Is this the best use of our funds?
Now, I'm going to bring up a point here, and I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No,
but,
you didn't interrupt me. I'm fine.
Okay. Now, the other thing is, too, there's been, on Facebook, I see the postings about, back and forth about this millage. And one of the claims is the people of the city of Flint itself are going to be exempted from because of the Headley amendment or attack, the law that's called Headley, because it limits, the millages. Would you like to address that?
No, it's absolutely not true. I'm not quite sure how that got started. Some very intelligent people believed it and were talking about it. The Headley Amendment is a provision of the Michigan Constitution that limits the amount of taxes that can be imposed on property owners in this state. It's very complicated. This time last week, I knew nothing about it except I knew it was there and it had something to do with taxes. Basically, there are limits. The city of Flint has been at the Headley Act limit for decades. The city of Flint may impose no more property taxes on its people. I am told that many of the taxing jurisdictions here in Genesee County are also at their limits, so once you get there, you have to find other ways to raise revenue. In Flint, unfortunately, more and more, it's becoming fees for services such as the water, but I'm digressing here. In addition to these limitations on how much a particular taxing authority can tax its jurisdiction, there is an overall tax on how much may be imposed on any individual property, and that's 50 mills. I think that's where this idea got some traction, because Flint is now taxed at 70 mills. Flint carries a very high tax burden. The complication is that not every tax counts against the 50 mil limitation. For example, the City of Flint taxes are not included. Community college taxes are not included. GISD taxes for vocational education, special education, not included. Taxes by various authorities, such as the airport authority, not included. So figuring out what is included or is not included is complicated, and that is the task of the Genesee County Equalization Department. They have a report on their website. This really started heating up last week. We're talking about this today, July 18th, so I think this probably started to get some wider circulation a little bit less than a week ago. And by the time it really came into public attention, we were pressing down on the weekend, and there really wasn't much the county could do to address the situation. But I personally emailed a number of county commissioners saying, you guys need to get on this thing now. If it's true, you need to tell people. If it's not, you need to tell them it's not. And I don't think it was a direct result of my email. I think they were getting this message from many people. On Monday, Mrs. Nolde, who is the head of the Equalization Department, appeared in front of the commission. I think they were having a committee meeting of the whole, and stated publicly that no, this is not true. The city of Flint will pay taxes just like everybody else. It was a good question, because when you do look at the tax burden and you look at the Headley Amendment, the city of Flint is over. It's just when you examine the details and you examine the law, it's not. Over the weekend, because I was getting personal messages regarding this from various people, I sat down and tried to figure it out myself. And the great thing about government is that you don't have to look very far. If you want to know what they're up to, you just go on their websites. And there was the equalization reports. It's on the Genesee County government website. Page 44 is Flint. You take the law and you start sorting it out. This is exempt, this is not exempt. And the city of Flint, if this passes, will be at about 39 mils, well shy of the 50 mil limit. Sorry to put you all to sleep, but it is an important subject, and the rumor that was flying is not true.
No, I think so. It's a very important thing. I don't think you bored anybody by that, who's listening, that is, because they are concerned. Hopefully they are concerned about what we're talking about. I would think, though, as I'm talking to you about that, if this is such, it's kind of such, the vagueness was there about who was going to be covered or who's going to be put a foot in it, and they had this misconception going on. I think something like that, once you start approaching the public to ask for more funding, you should probably have that resolved so you could answer that. I mean, definitively. And I think that's kind of to me, that kind of shows kind of a sloppiness in the way this has been done.
And again, rumors fly. I don't know how this got started. I didn't believe it at first. I pushed back. My pushback was pushback. Part of what happens, of course, is that this topic is somewhat sensitive for reasons that are not entirely clear to me. I don't know why some people aren't willing to say the obvious. But people were saying, well, I got it on good authority from. And I called a person with sufficient influence that I'm sure, well, I always return her phone calls, I think everybody does, and said, have you heard anything about this? And she got on the phone and came back and said yes, and she mentioned a name, very high official in county government, was saying it was true, at which point I was probably 90% persuaded. But because I thought it was important enough to spend a couple hours of my time, I sat down and figured it out for myself. And I was pretty well persuaded by Monday night that it was not true. I don't think the average person would have the skills to do that, which is why it was so very important that the county commissioners came out on Monday and said, no, this is not true. And I'm sure it's still floating around out there. I'm sure people still believe it, but it's not true. Everybody pays.
So that see, I'm kind of friends with Terry Bankert, and when I saw,
I like Terry.
So when I saw that he had some problems with this, and as well as you did, Terry's a person people who's been around Genesee County. He was a former the city ombudsman. He used to be a city clerk, city clerk, and he's also still a practicing attorney in this area. So I mean, and if you talk about involvement of Flint, I don't think you can get too many people who are more involved in the activities of people and the government of Flint. So when he's also a liberal Democrat, much like you, and I never heard him voice any opposition to any millage in the past 8 or 10 years that I've been talking to him back and forth on Facebook, though I've known him for much longer than that. But so when he spoke up against it, and I saw you're coming in with that too. I said there's got to be something to drive, to this, because both of you people are not people who are stingy or overly questioning about what you're generous. You're willing to be generous, and when you both chimed in that you didn't want, you had some opposition to this, I said I gotta bring this to attention, because both these people I know are probably on board for anything that's good for the community. And when I heard you guys talk, I had to go look into it myself. So also I'd like to tell people too that we, in the effort to be fair and unbiased, we also extended a invitation to people representing the other side of this, those who are for this, people who are going to be directly involved in probably the spending of the money. So far they've responded, but they're unable to come in until later. So hopefully after the 30th of July, they're supposed to be able to come in and discuss their side. But we have, so please, don't think we're trying to slam. That we're also trying to offer both sides. So hopefully that interview will be available very soon. Of course, it's several days away till the 30th, so we'll hope for they are able to show up. But I'd like to thank you you got a very busy schedule, and you came in and discussed this with us and I very much appreciate that. Anyway, can people contact you through Facebook? Would you encourage that?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Sure. The main issue I want people to consider is the process by which this particular millage has landed on their ballot. They did not open this up for public discussion. They did not seek the participation of other organizations. Many important organizations in our community, the Flint Children's Museum, Buckham Art Gallery, Clio has a very fine theater company, Flint Community Players, were not invited to participate. They have to compete with everybody else for $500,000 to be distributed through the Greater Flint Arts Council. There are some questions as to how much Burston Fieldhouse and McCree Theatre are going to get. There is apparently, not apparently, I now believe there is, in fact, a memorandum of understanding which has been agreed to by the cultural center organizations, the Greater Flint Art Council, McCree Theatre, and Burston Theatre, dividing up the money, and they won't release it. At the East Village Magazine interview, which was published last Friday, the director of the Flint Cultural Center Corporation and the director of the Flint Cultural Center Foundation both acknowledged that such a document exists, but they didn't want to talk about it because not all of the executive directors had signed off on making this document public. This is a lot of money. This is $8 million per year of taxpayer money. And apparently these organizations have already decided, without any public participation, how they're going to divide it up. That is not how we're supposed to do things. If people are going to be getting taxpayer money, they're supposed to be telling us about these things. And it would be nice if they did it before we voted. This is something that should not be a secret. They shouldn't consider making a secret. Their boards of directors should have been involved in this. They should have been the people who approved this memorandum of understanding, and if they were involved in this decision, they should have been looking out for the public too. And I find it hard to believe that they were, because the boards should have said, hey, we need to look at making this public as we do it. And they haven't done it, and they're not doing it. First town hall is tomorrow night. Maybe they'll pull it out then and show us. I don't know, but I think the public has a right to know now how these organizations plan to divide the money. I don't think it is binding on the county. The people, the promoters for Burston Fieldhouse and for New McCree Theatre are saying that they're going to get between $400,000 and $500,000 per year from this millage. And I don't have any reason to doubt that that's what's in the agreement, but I don't think if the public wasn't there negotiating openly, that the public is bound by that. And I think that's something that the voters need to know too. If people are voting for this millage because they believe that organizations that they themselves support are going to get large amounts of taxpayer money, I don't think that's set in stone at all. And if it's not, people need to know that before they vote. There just hasn't been enough transparency. And they say there has, but their view of transparency and mine are completely different. In the East Village Magazine, the Cultural Center directors, the director of the foundation and the director of the corporation itself, said that they wanted to use the money to maintain the buildings, to replace air conditioners, to put roofs on the buildings, to keep the grounds nice, to enhance security, all necessary things. It's a battle when you're on a board of a charitable organization to find the money to keep the lights on. Every single organization faces these problems. I just don't understand why some organizations, some favored organizations, are going to get taxpayer help with these challenges while others were cut out. I wish that we could just start over. I don't have any problem with public support for the arts at all. I would like to see a blank sheet of paper. I would like to see the people involved in designing this. Certainly the cultural center organizations are going to be deeply involved in this design. They're the ones who are supposedly carrying the banners of the arts here in Genesee County, but golly, they're not the only ones. Certainly jazz should be involved. Certainly street art should be involved. Certainly local theater groups should be involved. Classical music is my love and my joy. I'm a minority. Many people don't care for classical music at all. And the Flint Institute of Music does promote other genres, this is true, but for the most part, they're teaching people how to play classical music. It's important to me. But if we're using public monies, we should be making a real effort to promote things that are important to everybody and bring joy into everybody's life.
No, I agree with all what you said there about, your appreciation for arts, and and I think as people are listening to you, they're identifying with much of what you're talking about. Also, to go to more pragmatic points, I'd like to get back to, you mentioned this town hall. Where is the first one going to be held at, and what day and time?
This is the 18th. It'll be held tomorrow, the 19th, at the McCree Theatre, which is on Carpenter Road. It hasn't been as well publicized as I wish it had been, because they just announced it last week, so they haven't had much time. There's a second one next Tuesday, which I believe is July 24th. That will be at Whiting. The format has not yet been released. As I understand it, the moderator is going to be Randall Thompson, who is the president of Citizens for a Better Genesee County, which is the ballot campaign committee that's running this thing. Supposedly, the executive directors of all of the recipient organizations are going to be there. I hope some members of the board are there, and I hope some members of those boards are willing to take questions. We shall see.
No, I think, but again, you were mentioning names there too of organizations that are, or bodies that were actually I've never heard of before. But that's one thing I just underscores that with my assertion that the people of Genesee County a lot of them do seem to get involved. I mean, that's always impressive to me. I mean, as bad as things got in the city of Flint, there's so many people out there who are still in the trenches, who are still willing to put forth a lot of effort and time to bring issues to light, to be actively involved in the solving of what the problems they identified. So I mean, that's one thing I got to say. It's there's a lot of good people in Flint, a lot of concerned people in the area, and I think that's an asset I think that's often overlooked. So, but again, and you're one of them, by the way, for bringing this out to light.
Oh, no, I'm just sitting on Facebook asking questions, and I have gotten more involved. I've been sending emails to the commissioners and went to a commissioner meeting, but my involvement has been relatively modest. Terry Bankert, who you mentioned before, who has his own views, and I don't think you stated them quite accurately. I don't think he's opposed to this at all. I think he's got a lot of questions. He'd have to speak for himself. He's quite capable of doing that, but let's put it this way, I don't know how he's going to vote, and I've talked to him a lot about this. So, there's nothing wrong with voting for this millage. I'm not saying it's evil. I'm not saying the people who are promoting it are evil. I am saying that we could do better.
Actually, I didn't mean to come with that thing, but when he was voicing concern, though, I mean, because like I said, Terry, from my experience, has always been pretty willing to go along and vote for millages, and he has houses here in Flint and all that. So I mean, I always saw, but when he was bringing it, and that's one thing I got to say about Terry, he does allow people who have opposing views to have access to his wall on Facebook, and is pretty polite in discussing things with him. So I mean, I have to give that to him on that. So I'm sorry if I made that misrepresentation. So let me apologize for that.
I don't know. You need to apologize. Maybe what you said and what I heard were two different things.
I know. Usually, like I said, I've never seen where he even pretty much he was what I was reading. He had issues with this himself. So that's the reason I was saying that for. But like I said, Terry is from my experience, is pretty much a very very willing to give more of his money and more of his time for pretty much, any good cause that comes his way. And when he allowed, he brought it to attention through his Facebook messages and stuff like that, or postings. I was kind of, that kind of piqued my curiosity, because he just usually doesn't do that. He'll say vote or whatever, but he's encouraging more examination of this, and I think that's healthy. I think that's ultimately healthy.
It's not only possible, it's healthy for people who have different viewpoints to collaborate on particular identified issues. I have been in communication with many strong Republicans, Tea Party people who don't like this millage just because they don't like taxes. I understand what they're saying. I disagree with them. I'm approaching it from a different angle. It's not that I dislike taxes, though I would prefer not to pay them myself, of course, but I just don't think that this is the proper way to make decisions on how to spend this much money. But we all have questions, and we all have the rights to ask them, and it doesn't matter who you voted for in the last election. You can share similar concerns. We all live in this community, and whether you voted for Donald Trump in the last election has nothing to do with what you think about any particular other issue. That was what it was like as I was growing up. I think the divisions have been made more rigid artificially through people trying to encourage people only to talk to people who agree with them. That's damaging and it's destructive. We need to sit down as a community and figure out what's best for us collectively going forward.
That's the reason why I also extended an invitation for the people who want to see this pass, and hopefully they take us up on that offer, because I think that's what it is. I don't think there's very few demonic or horrific people in the world. There's bad people, admittedly, but on these kind of issues, basically it's misperceptions, it's lack of information, not revealing full information, and I think those will cause really serious problems, resentment and hostility down the road that I think can be avoided. And I think this kind of approach actually is what I think you would agree that having you on, as well as the chance for the other people on the other side to come up and answer these questions. I think that's the best way to do things. Instead of dividing to being very divisive, I also agree it's artificially imposed lately. I think that's just destructive. It doesn't do any good for anybody, and hopefully we can remedy that to some degree. So I thank you again, though. And is there anything else you'd like to say before this wraps up?
I don't have anything else to say, although anybody that wants to find me won't have any problem. My last name is Pohly. Send me a private message, post on my wall, whatever works for you. The communication, the transparency, the accountability issues are all very important. I would be happy to talk to anybody who disagrees with me on this issue.
Well, and I thank you very much for your time, and also extend an invitation, any open invitation for any time there's something that you find that you want to discuss to bring to public light. Please contact me and we'll set up a time for you to come in. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good day.